Namaste, divine friends. Today we're going to talk about the Gunas, the three Gunas, Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva. The three Gunas are the binding constituents of nature. It's these three Gunas that make up the world that we live in. This whole phenomenological, physical world that we see is all bound together by these Gunas. So even though you may have heard of them, you may have thought of them as just kind of arbitrary philosophical constructs. They really have a pertinent effect to how we interrelate with the world. So as you stick with me, we'll talk about these three aspects and go into how they affect so many different aspects of our lives. And we'll be going through this with our slideshow. So let's just jump right into the slideshow here and we can look and see what our gunas are. So there's three gunas, the binding constituents of matter. You have sattva, rajas, and tamas, or the adjective form, sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. And these three are what hold the world together. Tamas is a retentive capability. Tamas has retention. The Rajas capability is our mutative, it's our change capacity. And the sattvic element is the inherent nature of a thing. It is what makes it what it is. And you need all three. You need sattva, rajas, and tamas in order to have a whole. One of the best ways to really understand how these work and how they hold the whole physical world together is to go into the next slide and look at our solar system and compare the solar system to the atoms that make up the whole world. And the old saying, as above, so below, so above. It relates directly to the gunas, as they say everything is made out of the same stuff. Everything works together, whether it's macrocosmic or microcosmic. It's easiest to understand the solar system because we can see that easier. And so we look at it and say, well, we have the sun in the center. We have all the planets floating around the sun, moving at a certain velocity and sort of falling in their elliptical orbits. And then you have the gravitational force between the planets and the sun, which keeps them at their distance. And you look at those and say, well, okay, how does that relate to sattva, rajas, and tamas? But we can see that our retentive capability, tamas is the sun. The sun is the mass that holds it all together. Without the sun, nothing would work. So the sun is our retentive capability. The sun is tamas. What's our mutative capability, the motion capability? And that motion is the movement of the planets around the sun, their inertia, their momentum. The motion, if we didn't have the motion, they would fall back into the sun and we would all just collapse into one big hole. So the Rajas, that motion is critical for keeping the solar system together. And then what's the sattvic aspect? The sattvic aspect of the solar system is the gravitational force, the attraction that keeps the planets being pulled into the sun. If we didn't have the gravity, the planets would just keep going straight and not have their elliptical orbit. So it's that attractive force. The attractive force, the love, is the energy that attracts all of us together. That is the essential essence of who we are, of what everything is. So you look and say, well, okay, the solar system is made up of tamas, rajas, and sattva. Tamas, the earth, or tamas, the sun, holding um, everything still. Rajas, the momentum of the planets, and the sattvic, the attractive force between them. You go down, let's look at the atom, a single atom. That is directly analogous. What's the center of the atom? It's the neutrons. The neutrons are the neutral mass that give the atoms their weight. Without neutrons, you just don't have significant mass in the atoms. So what's the Rajas aspect? The Rajasic aspect of atoms are the electrons. The electrons zip around the protons, and it's the energy, electricity, these electrons. The electrons give us the um, electrical energy. It's the power, it's a movement. So electrons are the Rajas aspect of atoms. And now what is the sattvic aspect? The sattvic aspect are the protons. The protons are the attractive force. The protons pull the electrons in, keep the electrons from losing their orbit. And so you have sattva, rajas, tamas in the solar system. You have sattva, rajas, tamas in each atom holding everything together. And we know from our experience that the solar system is almost all void. This drawing here is very not to scale. If you've seen a scale drawing of it, it's amazing how much void there is in the solar system. And atoms are the same way. Atoms are almost all completely void, yet our perception um, gives them mass because of just how they're bound together. So let's go into some more details with that. What's the next step of this? The next page will go into how those work. So the binding constituents of matter, as we had said, sattva is the essence of a thing. Rajas is a mutative capability. It causes things to change and to move. And the tamas is our latent capacity. It's the latency that just sits there. In our mind, we can look at it and say, okay, who are we? Our sattva aspect of ourselves is our intellect, our buddhi. It's our ability to think. It's the I'm knowing aspect. The rajas aspect is our ego, our ahamkara. Our ego is who we are, our image of ourselves. And tamas is our mind, the tamasic aspect. And that we always hear about mind, ego, intellect are the three aspects of our larger mind, ourselves, and all three have their unique capability. Without the mind, if you lose your mind, you lose your memory. Without memories, we can't keep track of anything. So, but the memories are the mutative, or the memories are the tamasic aspect. They retain everything that we've done. The rajas aspect is the ego. It's how we can relate as who we are to the outer world. And the sattvic aspect, the intellect, is our internal reflection. Reflect on the higher powers, the higher thoughts, to be able to analyze, to be able to think. And after we think, we say, okay, I am thinking, that's the ego. And when we're done thinking, we store all that information that we thought in the mind. So the three gunas, mind, ego, and intellect. So let's keep moving on and see how the gunas work in Sankhya philosophy. If you looked at the Sankhya philosophy talks, you know that there's 24 aspects in Sankhya. Mind, ego, intellect are the first three, and those come out of the unmanifest matter, which is the 24th element. And then you have the other four elements in there, the primordial elements, the subtle energies, and the five organs of sense perception and the five organs of motor action. All of these are directly relatable to the gunas. So let's go through these one at a time. Our primordial elements, the bhutas. You have ether, which is the space, is the sattvic aspect of the world. Fire, rajasic. Fire is changing. It causes things to change. You burn things, you melt things. It's very a transformative fire. And then tamas is the earth. The earth is our retentive element of these three. And then between fire and ether, you have air. The air is kind of half sattvic, half rajas. And so you have the rajasic sattvic element of air. And between rajas and tamas, you have water. So between earth and fire, you have water. And so this is how our five elements of earth, water, fire, air, and ether map into the three elements of tamas, rajas, and sattva. Let's go over to the subtle energies, the tanmatras, the second set of the 24 in Samkhya philosophy. And the sattvic element is sound. Sound is, we hear sounds, it's very uplifting, very enlightening. Sound is the best way to learn. If somebody tells you something, you understand it so much better than if you're reading it or anything, because you could be struggling with something and somebody says just the right words and you get it. So sound is sattvic energy. Then there's touch, is the air element. You feel heat, you feel cold. It's related to the air. Rajasic element of tanmatra is light. Light is very quick changing, flickering. You get watching TV, you get all those flashes of light, all those flashes of coloring. It could be very unsettling because there's so much motion in that energy. And then the water maps to the taste in the tanmatra because you need water to get taste. And then the last one is smell. Smell is our retentive element. And you can relate to smell being retentive because if you've ever smelled some of your grandma's cooking, you've gone outside in the woods and you picked up a scent that reminded you of childhood. Scents are very deeply ingrained in our mind. So scents are very retentive. They're very tamasic, whereas sounds don't quite get retained quite as much. They are the sattvic elements of those. So let's move on to the Janendriyas, the five organs of sense perception. And these map pretty directly to the tanmatras. And you have the auditory ability to hear the sound. And this is a bit confusing sometimes in Samkhya, but you have the organs of sense perception and you have the subtle energies. And they have to map because without sound, there is no point for an auditory capacity. And the auditory was sort of co-evolved with the element of sound. And then touch, your touch element, you can feel the thermal organ, the skin feels the thermal energy. The light, the eyes see the visual energy. Gustatory is your physical organ that can feel the energy of taste. And the olfactory organ, your organs in the nose to be able to feel that energy of smell and relate that to the self. And then you have the five organs of motor action, the kamendriya. You have the organ of speech, which maps to our auditory. You have the organs of arms, manual movement. Then you have the locomotive element, the legs. And here you can see the legs work because the legs are rajas. They move us around. They are the motion element. Whereas the arms are half motion, half speech. As you understand that people use their arms when they talk. Arms help convey speech. When you're talking, they really help the speech go. Excretory is complementary to the taste and the water as we excrete all of the materials. And then the procreative is our retentive capability, the retentive organ, because it's our ability to procreate that keeps these species, all the species, retained on this planet. So here are the five um, elements of each of these four energies of Sankhya philosophy. So it's take a moment to just take a look through those and see how three automatically becomes five, and those five multiply with these four to become 20. And you add that to the mind, ego, intellect, and the unmanifest energy, and those become the 24 elements of Samkhya philosophy. So let's look at the gunas now as they relate to the pranic force within the body. Go over to the slides, we'll shift over, and we'll start with the chakras. You know, the three gunas relate to five chakras, the bottom five. You have the throat chakra, Vidusha, the heart chakra, the Anahata, Rajas chakra, the navel, the Manipuri, the sacral chakra, Svadhisthana, and of course the root chakra, the Muladhara, is our root one, which is our stability, our grounding chakra. And each of these relate to the five pranas, the five pranic forces in the body, mapped directly to the three gunas, as you have prana, udana, vyana, apana, and samana. And when you learn the pranas, it's useful to learn them in this order: prana, udana, vyana, apana, and samana, because they directly map to our three gunas. And so the action of those, our prana in the body, the subtle essence of prana, creates our self-awareness. It's these subtle pranic forces that move through our energy channels, allow us to be aware of ourselves, be aware of the surroundings. The udana is our body awareness, our proprioceptors. They allow us to know where the body is in space, which is a motion plus an awareness. The rajas aspect is our motion aspect, the vyana. The vyana controls all the circulation of the fluids within the body. The sacral element, the apana is forces the elimination of our all the waste, solid waste, liquid waste, our exhales, all of those. And so we always talk about prana and apana being opposites, but prana is our inhales, it's our inspirations, it's our self-awareness. The apana becomes our exhalations, which has a movement aspect to it, but also a retentive aspect for tamas. And then the samana prana. The samana prana controls the absorption. As we eat food, it gets the energy gets absorbed into our cells. Our cells pull in all of those food particles to be able to take the nutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, the subtle energies from those, absorb those into the cells so that we can um, make our body. Our bodies are now formed, and so that's the tamasic aspect of um, those. So hopefully this can give you an idea of, yeah, just where those pranas fall in as it relate to the gunas. So let's jump into our next page, which are the koshas, as we have five koshas in the body, of course. Becomes a magic number through a lot of the Samkhya philosophy, just from the way that the three gunas map into everything else. And so these five koshas, you have the Anandamaya Kosha, which is our causal body, which is our bliss body. It's us as bliss. It's our essence. Our essence is bliss. Our essence is Ananda. So it all drops into the Anandamaya Kosha. And the next one is our Vijnanamaya Kosha. Vij means knowledge, and the Vijnanamaya Kosha is located in the astral body. The astral body between the forehead, right below the crown of the head, is the location of the astral body. And the Vijnanamaya Kosha maps to our wisdom, our higher knowledge, which is our get interface between the bliss and our just normal knowledge, which the Manamaya Kosha is also located in the astral body. And the Manamaya Kosha is our mental power, our ability to think. And so when we're thinking, our mind is always moving. We say, well, our mind is working, our mind is moving. That is a motion aspect. So that comes in the Manamaya Kosha in the astral body. And then we have the Pranamaya Kosha. That's the physical movement of the prana through the body. And the Pranamaya Kosha is really the energetic aspect. It is the energy that creates and sustains this physical body. And so the last kosha now is the Anamiya Kosha, which is our physical body. And the physical body is our retentive capability, because it's the physicality, the physicalness of our body that allows us to retain, to be here, to hold the spirit within in a certain place. And so the physical body is our tamas aspect, the retentive aspect. Our mental ability is our rajas, our ability to think, to move. And the pranamaya kosha is the bridge between physical and mental. And of course, we are bliss and located in the causal body, deep within the center of the heart. And the wisdom is our bridge between the mental bodies and the bliss body. And we can also map these into the 5 limbs, the bottom 5 or top 5 limbs of the 8-limb path of Patanjali. So asana, when we're doing our yoga practice, asana works on the physical body. It works through the body. And then we have pranayama. The pranayama practice is the energetic portion of the practice that is works on the pranamaya kosha. And then the rajas. Rajas is emotion, and the pratyahara is our ability to internalize, to quiet the mind, to sit and turn off all of our mental functions. So the pratyahara works directly on the mind, because once we can find a way to turn off all the sense signals going from the energetic body to the mental body, that is pratyahara, and that will allow us to go up to the next limb, which is dharana. Dharana is concentration. Once we can get the mind quiet, our wisdom allows us to concentrate within the astral body on a single point, a single idea. And then dhyana is meditation. Dhyana, the meditation, is our bridge into the bliss body, into the causal body. The meditation is when we actually can merge and become and relate to our object of concentration, is dhyana. So these gunas and the koshas have a direct correlation between all of those. So let's move on to our next slide. The next slide is in Ayurveda. And this is really typically where we see the gunas uh, most in our practice, in our lives, as they get related to it a bit more here. Because the gunas relate to the doshas. You have 3 gunas, you have 3 doshas. The 3 doshas are vata, pitta, and kapha. And these often get confused between the two. But the gunas are the binding constituents. The doshas is kind of how the body is balancing each of those 3 gunas. But kapha is our retentive dosha. It's our ability to retain material. Pitta is our fiery, energetic dosha, our personality, our bodies, how we relate in a pitta way. And then the vata is the sattvic aspect. It's kind of our essence becomes Vata. And the goal is to keep all the doshas in balance. And this is really the key. This is one take-home message from the talk, is like the three gunas have to be in balance. Tamas, Rajas, and Sattvic are all in balance. If we had too much gravity from the sun, we would pull the earth into the sun. If we had too much momentum from the planets, they would shoot out into the solar system and not return. So the gunas need to be in balance in order for the uh, binding constituents to keep everything hold together. It's all about balance. Yoga is all about balance. And the doshas are all about balance. You want to find good balance between Kapha, Pitta, and Vata. And Kapha, if you're in balance, you have a strong Kapha, you're stable, you're strong, you're solid. You see some people that are just really, really grounded, really earthy, really solid people, and they're just like, oh yeah, that's a nice kapha body. It's a nice, solid, yeah, very strong person. Pitta, when pitta is in balance, you're energetic. You have a lot of energy. You're very confident and you're very adaptive because you don't get thrown for a loop because change is your nature. If something changes, you can continue to change because Rajas controls the mutative aspect, the evolution. And so you want the pitta to be, your pitta dosha to, yeah, show itself as confidence and adaptability, mutability. And your vata, if you're in balance in vata, you're very creative. You work up in the higher centers of the head. You're a very creative person. You have very strong mental clarity. You kind of have a physical lightness to yourself. You can, as you walk very lightly, you kind of glide, and that becomes your balanced in vata. And you look at all three of these doshas, and you should be able to look at those and say, I want to be all nine of those. I want to be stable, strong, creative, light, energetic, because all of those are, yeah, strong attributes. And we want to be in balance so that we can, yeah, express ourselves to our limit through all three of these gunas. The problem with Ayurveda, or not the problem with Ayurveda, but Ayurveda, it's currently the way it's being expressed is talking about when you're out of balance. If you're out of balance, then you have excess of one of those. So if you have an excess vata, then they say, oh, you're vata dominant. If you have excess kapha, then they say you have a kapha imbalance. And most of the time in Ayurveda, they talk about what's out of balance so they can bring you in. And so if you say that you're a vata person, it doesn't mean that vata is your strength. It really means vata is your weakness. And it points out your weakness, not your strength, which is kind of a backwards, unfortunate way of looking at it, but that's just how it is. So in kapha, if you have excess kapha, you become heavy, you become overweight, you become lethargic and submissive. And when we think about somebody that's kapha, we usually think about these excess ones. We think about people that are just really sluggish, slow, and heavy. And we don't think about the kapha people that are strong and solid and robust because we always think of the excess ones. And so go into pitta. The pitta people, you think about the people that are strong pitta. They're very fiery, fiery personalities, very competitive, very aggressive. They just have too much pitta going on. And you look at that and say, well, if the kapha people would have more pitta, if the pitta people would have more kapha, if they could be a little more in balance, you're kapha pitta, then you're strong and solid and energetic. And Sattva. If you have excess sattva, you tend to have a nervous energy about you. You're a little bit nervous, you may be a little bit chatty. You just sort of talk too much or just sort of just chat. And you know that the sattvic aspect also relates to sound, and sound is excess sound is shows up as chattiness or flighty. You just when you see somebody that are um, just a little bit not there. They're just a little too creative, a little bit too light. We see they have a little bit excess sattva, a little bit excess vata in their personalities. And so this is the last slide. We'll leave it up for a second as we wrap through and do a quick summary of the gunas. The gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas, they all um, are the binding constituents. They relate to pretty much every aspect because they relate to the atoms, they relate to the solar systems, they relate to our bodies, they relate to our energies, they relate to how we relate to the world. And the goal is to find balance, to seek balance. We don't want to be overly vata. We don't want to be overly light. We need to have balance so that that balance can then become our platform for moving on in everything we do in this life and the next. So with that, I hope you've enjoyed this brief little discussion on the gunas. Hope it's given you some insight into these pieces and encourage you to look a little bit deeper and realize that there's a lot of depth into this practice. So, with that, thank you very much. I really appreciate your attention. Thank you. Namaste.